Okay, so again, this is just a lot of overview information. Hear the terminology. There's not anything really to memorize. You will use it enough and it will become part of your language if it's not already. So when we go over to Solidworks, we're now going to create this geometry, and the takeaway for the threads and threadings, and I'm fascinated by threads and all of the ways they're used and created, and the manufacturing gears. There's just these geometries that capture my imagination, and I can talk about them for quite a while. So when we go into the sketching, we actually have to create this geometry. Then we're going to start with a set of rules. So the recommendation is, when we get over to the whole wizard, that you go back and you watch part 2, and when you are going through the sketching, as you build into your toolbox this set of tools, that you come back and maybe watch this part 3 now. Maybe every couple of weeks, or when you want to kind of revisit the terminology and just reinforce those connections. So with sketching, we're going to be dealing with the objects, the sketch entities, lines, arc, circles, rectangles, slots, etc. And then rather than dimensioning each of those items, each of those objects, to whatever degree, we're going to use relations. And there's a lot of power in relations, and dimensions fall into the category of a relation, or treated as a relation. So they're not really separate. They are part of our process. So horizontal and vertical, we can kind of visualize those. Those are really accessible, coincident. They're going to share endpoints, or a point and an endpoint, or a center point of a circle. Really, the geometry will show up in coincident. And then concentric, the circles are with the same center. So, the center points will be the same, and the circles could be different sizes. We also have a co-radial that is not as common, but it does get used to where they're sharing the same center and the same radius, so the same size circle. And then tangency, circles and arcs connected or touching at just one point. There are certainly more relations that get tied into this mix. All right, so our goal is to have a fully defined sketch. All objects are in black and there's no accidental changes. You have to make a conscious decision to change a dimension, change a relation, move that geometry. Under defined, we'll leave blue objects, and has the possibility of gaps, overlaps, or needs an additional relation, a geometric or dimensional relation. First rule, all objects relate in some way to the origin. Whether we put a dimension on it, we make an endpoint coincident, we make a center point of a circle coincident or concentric, I believe it shows up as concentric anyway, we'll see in a minute. And then there is a list of parameters that while tempting should be avoided. So if you're coming over from Autodesk where you're entering in values, it's very tempting to enter in those values, but parameters do not create fully defined sketches. And then dimensions inside a sketch can be driving or driven. And if it says that it's driven, then it can't be changed. Only a driving dimension can change. And that can happen because the geometry is related by has other relations or other dimensions. You're duplicating a relation. Sometimes it creates conflict and goes to overdefined. Dimensions outside of a sketch are for reference, dim expert or the model-based dimensions. And then mention too many relations will cause the sketch to be overdefined. And a lot of times that is where the software will say, well, you probably want that to be driven so we don't overdefine, or you can just hit the Control Z cancel to clear it out and go back to whatever state and try and figure out what it is that it needs. All right, so our contours and regions then, we have situations where the outside of the sketch becomes a contour and areas inside become regions, and we can have double E, triple E, as many regions nested inside, overlapping, doing all kinds of fun, strange things as we want, and we can use that to further define our sketches. So let's see, that should be the last slide for now. So we'll come back to this and we'll jump into SolidWorks. I am looking at a blue origin because I saved that with my template. And if I don't have one, then I'm going to come up here to the heads up and click on View Origins. You can see it. Right now I'm in a gradient, so if I want to change the background, we talked a little bit about the views in part 1. So I'm in a 3-point faded, so I have the gradient. A lot of times you'll see my system set up as plain white. And probably another quick mention would be that since I'm in 2023, you won't see a lot of differences, but you might see a few. And I'm trying to look for those because we're in that crossover where industry will be adopting 2023, and I should have saved that with the default. So looking at the feature tree, default, display state 1. All right, so that caught my attention. I had to take care of it. So as industry adopts 2023, you're going to see more of this, and there are minor differences for version. It's the things that will catch your eye or trip you up that become the problem. All right, so to create our geometry, we are going to pick a sketch plane. So we did the sketch, and then pick the plane. That takes a little bit, but if I come over to the front and either left click and go to sketch, top, go to sketch, right, go to sketch, that puts me immediately into a sketch, and with that rotate normal to view, when most of the time we're going to be in the front, but we'll have this thing called design intent, whereas we become more familiar with the software, our design intent says, my magic crystal ball of design intent, when I put this in the assembly, I want it oriented, I want its position, I want it to be ready to go. And to make it ready to go, I'm going to put and start this sketch the way that I'm visualizing it in one of these 3 planes. So the sketch plane is now on the front. I'm in the red. I have a confirmation corner depending on the template and other things that go on. Sometimes that template, that confirmation corner will disappear, in which case we can right click and exit the sketch or rebuild. Rebuild is also an important icon, which has as its hotkey Control B or Control Q as a complete rebuild. All right, again, more terminology that is just listen, let it digest, and as you need it and start to make those connections, revisit it and be aware of what it's doing. So we have our sketch tools. All right, so we mentioned line, circle, arc, rectangle, slot. We also have polygons, splines, ellipses, and fillets. We don't use the insert plane into 3D sketch. And then the text. All right, we have to have a 3D sketch to insert a plane into a 3D sketch. So we don't use 3D sketches, therefore we don't use that icon. All right, on the text side, being able to put text geometry into our parts, and then the point, not used very often, but when it's needed, it is a very valuable tool. All right, so the rectangle, we'll start with a line and generate a rectangle, and then we'll generate a rectangle for comparison tool. Under the line, we have 3: line, center line, midpoint. Most of the time we'll just go straight into lines, so I can click. Everything switches to the property manager, and I have as sketched, horizontal, vertical, angle. Most of the time as sketched. If I need for construction or infinite length, we can do midpoint. So we can change everything after the property manager, or with the property manager after we've selected the tool. All right, visual clues on the work area. So as I'm dragging around, I have inference lines. Those little blue dash dotted lines are telling me that I'm vertical too. The little white box with the vertical line is also saying that you can infer, but it's not going to automatically apply. So we should see the horizontal, the vertical, the horizontal. And when I drag up to close to, the pencil goes to, then now I'm going coincident to the origin. And we have two options with our selection. I can click, or I can click drag. 99% of the time, okay, 90% of the time you're going, in the videos, you're going to see me click drag. So I'll start with that. Left click, hold down, and drag. Now my sketch numeric input is on, and I'm in Windows 10, and I have it set for this value. So if I were to put in 2 inches and hit enter, then I'm going to apply that dimension and to the line. Difference being that from what I've seen in 2011, and maybe somebody can verify this for me, if I right click, the driven will be selected. And I'm not sure why it's automatically going to driven, and not sure where those parameters are. If you don't like to do that, then you right click and turn off the sketch numeric input, and then we can just go align, and it shows me that it's vertical. And let me undo and do that again, and I'm just going to hit line on the keyboard so I can jump right into the line command. I'm clicking on the endpoint and dragging, and we'll do this again with the click. The little yellow box is telling me that I am inferring vertical, and it's also going to apply vertical. So once I let go, I see the little green box with the vertical, and I see a vertical over in the existing relations. My two visual clues that I've gotten that relation applied automatically. All right, we come over back to the origin. I have one in yellow and one in white. The yellow is telling me that I'm going to get horizontal applied, and my inference dotted blue lines are telling me that even though I'm vertical, I'm not going to get that relation. So horizontal, and then if we go back, then I get a concentric and a vertical. All right, so those combinations of relations give me a lot of response to what's going on the screen. So if I left click and hold down and drag, I can see that I'm not able to move left and right because I have a dimension, I have these relations. I'm not able to rotate because I have verticals, horizontals, and I'm not able to move off of the origin because I have a coincident. So to apply that last dimension, we can right click and go Smart Dimension, or go up to the Command Manager and Smart Dimension, and whichever one, we can go into the Modify. Let's do that again. So Control Z a couple times, Smart Dimension, make sure to click, and we'll have to go through the dimension choices. So once I have created the dimension or selected the object, I need to place the dimension, and then the Modify box comes up, and that's another one of those situations that I know my fingers are way ahead of my mouth. So when we get to the Modify box, everything's highlighted in blue. I don't have to click in there, I don't have to do anything. And occasionally you'll click in this address, and this address is used for other things, but typically you don't want to rename the dimension. So I put in the 1 or 1 point. It's going to assume a whole number is 1 inch, and then enter on the keyboard, we have our value. And then right click and accept, escape. There's another one somewhere, but we can get back through. And then if you want to kind of organize the dimensions, do whatever, you can left click, hold down, and drag. All right, so another rectangle then is going to be, we're just going to start this. There's my inference line. I'm going to click and drag, and it stays connected, so it's a continuous, and drag and click, still looking for those inferences. So what happens if I miss? I'm horizontal, I'm off horizontal. The little yellow lines are showing me those horizontal and vertical inferences, and the blue lines are showing me inferences to other geometry. So again, a lot of visual things going on, and that yellow is pretty light. But let's go ahead and connect it. If I wanted to end it there, I can right click and end chain by double click. I don't have very much luck with the double click. I usually end up putting another small tail of a line there, or can hit the A to switch to an arc. So we're not really doing the arcs yet. And so let me try the double click. All right, that time it worked, but occasionally I'll get one that is in between. So if I go to connect those, maybe I missed, maybe I decided that I wanted to put something in there. Now I need to apply those relations manually. So over on the property manager, we have horizontal and vertical. And when I click, then we have horizontal and vertical. So I want that one to be horizontal. I want that one to be vertical. And I could have just as easily come over here and said horizontal, vertical on the property manager. Having it pop up next to where you're applying it is pretty nice, not to have to do all that work of moving the mouse over to the property manager. All right, so this one can fully rubber band, can do whatever. Let's see, my shaded sketch contours are on, but I'm not. Okay, kind of seeing the difference with the gradient. I have to check out the colors. Used to seeing that go to a gray. We should see it a little more when I overlap. No? Okay, I'm going to have to check my settings then. It must be in that scheme. So I mentioned the contours and regions. This one's underdefined. I can move it. It can change. I can do something as small as oops, and I've changed the part. All right, so on this one, because it's fully defined, I have to either change the dimension or change a relation to get it to adjust. So a contour then would be this outside. If I set my pencil down, go all the way around wherever I set it down, get back to. So contour. And the regions then are the areas in between. So when I click in, it's showing me contour, and then if my shaded sketch contour is running, I would see lighter, lighter, and then a darker area on the region. So I'm going to switch real quick and see if those are showing up. All right, so interesting. I'm going to have to look back in the options. I don't think I changed anything. So, all right, but takeaway: contour, contour, region, region, region. So when we go to make this an extrusion, then that's going to be a consideration. Normally it wouldn't have all of this extra geometry. So let's make this over defined real quick. Right now we have underdefined because of this guy. When it was just this, it went to fully defined, and I forgot to mention it. But let's make it over defined by applying another dimension. All right, so make this dimension driven. I can leave it if I want it for reference, or if there are relations or something that applies, then I can leave it and have it for reference and hit OK. Otherwise, I would cancel or escape and get out of it. Notice that this is gray geometry, where these are extension lines are in a darker black. Those are the driving dimensions, and then this one, if I try to change it, it says no, it's a driven dimension, can't do that. Too bad. What else will we be looking at? So if I set that line, and I'm going to do the famous select control select, I only said that a couple thousand times. Hold down the select the first object, hold down the control button, select the second object, and we'll have up here somewhere a make equal. If I've made those equal and then I try to add a relation, it's going to give me the same thing. It says the equal relation is priority there because it was applied first. All right, so the 2 inches isn't going to help. And because vertical, vertical, then that would also be 2 inches, even though I applied the equal. So we're getting into the logic of these relations and what can cause things to go over defined. And the solution is to let those objects be driven. And then if I right-click, and now we're going to start to see the reds and the yellows, because I said, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and create that conflict. And then if I highlight here and select the equal, or I highlight here, let's see, where is it? Oh, there we go. My equal length and horizontal, those are the 2 that are in conflict. I can delete the equal length, and now this becomes the driving dimension. And if I make it 1 inch, then it updates, and the driven dimension updates to reflect it. All right, so there's many things going on there. So let's draw some circles, and we're not going to worry about fully defining this sketch. So a circle can be a click and drag. So click, click, and then click and drag, let go, and we'll have the same. So the center points and the center point, and if I try to put one on top of the other, that would be my coincidence, and it's showing me concentric, but 2 points are showing up, and concentric at the end point, concentric, and I'm thinking little x is probably that it's showing the point. So that one's picking up point to coincident on the line, the midpoint, and I get that little snap whenever I get close to one of those other objects that I would want to apply that relation to. So let's make that a little bit smaller, and we'll do the select, control select, and I can go make coincident, control Z. If I select the 2 perimeters, then I can make concentric, and control Z. Let's check that again. So coincidence for the points, and concentric for the circles, and co-radial will create duplicates. So duplicates can be kind of problematic in that if I have a line on top of another line, I might be able to see those points. I don't really know where they're showing up, and unless I can move it or do something with it, then pretty much I can do the window pick. All right, so from left to right is everything inside of the window. Right to left is everything crossing the window and inside of the window. So if I just go to pick that, I'm picking the outside, but I would need to pick or completely move it out of the way to be able to get back in and delete that. So co-radial and having those not really a good choice. If I could get if I dimension this fully, then let's play with that a second. I'll make that coincident. We'll go back and make those equal just to see what I selected there. There we go, equal. All right, and if I put a dimension on this one and it applies, 0.6 is close enough. And maybe we come over here and attach it to the midpoint. Not seeing the midpoint, not seeing, it's having some issues. Doesn't really like that. Midpoint, it did go fully defined even though there's technically 2 there. So the weird part is that when I delete it, I still have a circle. So previous versions that may have stayed under defined. Interesting. So we'll see if that's consistent. It's probably still not try to avoid it. Not a best practice to have all those objects on top. All right, so dimension placement. We'll mention that real quick, and then we'll close out the video with the basic sketching. So I have a dimension on the circle. The leaders can be to the radius, to the diameter, or to a linear inside inside and out. That didn't go back to inner. Okay, so it did rotate, so it rotated around. Not sure if I can grab one of those handles. No, it's going to move pretty much wherever it wants. So typically we're going to stay with the radius or the diameter. I'm not going to try to go out of my way to make the linear, and arcs are always going to be radiuses and circles are always going to be diameters, but depending on the geometry and what I want to work with, then that is going to kind of determine which one's better. Alright, so one more mention with the contour and region. We're ready to make a solid. I now have multiple contours, multiple regions. I could trim these out to exactly what I want, but I haven't trimmed regularly in quite a while, so we're just going to make it 1 inch, and the blue box highlights, if it was just one box, it would show me the preview. It wouldn't even ask me contours and regions. So I have region, I have region, I have region, I have region, since I didn't overlap those. And then I have contour, shows up as sketch contour 1 and sketch region 1. These will create 2 separate bodies. If I pick the last one, and let's reverse that. I'll clear the selections. I want that region, and that contour. All right, just as an example. What I'm going to get then is it excludes that one, not necessarily a cut, but the reason that I end up now, I showed the solid bodies, and if you didn't show the solid bodies, it would still automatically show this. I end up with an extrude, an extrude, and an extrude. And at each of these intersections here, inside here, and inside here, I have 0 thickness geometry. So there's no way for it to merge because that edge and that edge are just touching. There's no overlap, no intersection, or if there was a gap, I would still get the solid body. So, and depending on the geometry is what you're going to end up with. And if I see those solid bodies, it's kind of an error check of, did I intend to do that? And I wanted to see those, or did I not intend to do that, and why did I get those? All right, so many visual clues. That's probably the biggest challenge you face, is to be able to go through and decipher a lot of these things that are popping up on the screen, and colors and lines and shapes, and then it doesn't necessarily do what you want, or it does what you want, just not the way that you wanted. So many things going on to get us to this point where we can create our geometry.